Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're looking forward to this chat. We are going to talk about being a customer of technology, and we have quite a powerhouse team here from a wide, diverse range of industries. The perspectives will be, quite varied around technology in general, but it's going to be hard not to have some AI threaded through here, given our team and where we're at from an AI perspective. So. Again, at the end, we will have some time for questions, so definitely feel free, and please do drop your questions into the chat, and we'll watch them as we go, but we'll definitely make time at the end to answer them. So to kind of kick off, we had interesting polls at the beginning. We had some great responses. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on the results. Did the results surprise you? Do you have a different perspective? Are there any industries that you think are further ahead or behind? And Kevin, we'll start with you.
Right off the bat, the results didn't surprise me at all. They were in line with what I expected. For one, this is BC, so understanding BC is far more resource-centric. It didn't surprise me that we saw mining, oil and gas, the resource-heavy elements, number one there. With respect to the adoption, it didn't surprise me as well, given the capital cost that you have to do in resource and mining for any technology adoption. And that goes even for the lack of technology adoption in the agriculture side of it. I've got a bit of a sweet spot for agriculture because I'd love to invest heavily into sustainable agriculture, but I know there's massive regulatory barriers to that, which is unfortunate, but is something that needs to change. There's also barriers from a physical perspective, go-to-market perspective. There's a number of challenges there. On the world of finance, that's where we play. And there is a lot happening in the world of finance right now with respect to technology adoption. And we'll get into it a little bit more because it's fraught with conflict on how to move forward, especially with an AI realm. And I don't see that. My background, just so everybody knows, is I was at Bitstu. That was in the electrical distribution world, it was in oil and gas, it was in the industrial sector. And I do see a massive amount of technology adoption in those areas. It's a bit more fragmented, but when you're starting to look at the new world of AI, that's far more conflicted right now.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Caitlin, how about you? What did you think about the poll results?
Yeah, I agree with Kevin. I mean, I think not particularly surprising, and tech adoption is a journey, right? And I think, we're going to talk as a panel about some of the challenges along the way as you progress through that journey. I mean, maybe to take just a different perspective, I tend to think that success on this path or the pace of adoption is maybe less a function of industry and perhaps more a function of, the dynamics, both internal and external at any particular company, right? I mean, tech adoption requires budget, sure, but also requires the will and the determination and to some extent the risk appetite to move forward with the change. And that can just, I think we all know, sort of be inherently more difficult at perhaps larger, more established companies, or said differently, change might just happen at a slower pace. And so I tend to think you can have these different levels of stakeholder buy-in and stakeholder willingness across industries. It's really a function of the dynamics inherent in a particular business.
No, we appreciate that. I think there's a lot of complexities for sure. Andrew, Erica mentioned at the top, you've had sort of opportunity to be on, inside at some large scale organizations, and now at CGI, seeing a wide variety of organizations. What did you think about the poll results? Is that in line with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this a lot since our prep meetings and conversations, and some conversations with clients around the globe recently. And I think, I would have loved to have seen that with a slice of geography to it, right? So in Canada, we have, I think, relative to the rest of the world, how people would have felt about that. Canada right now, we're 7th out of 7 in the G7 in terms of productivity. there's the number out there right now is 38% of Canadian companies use AI in some capacity. The US is closer to 68, and Europe closer to 69 or 71. We've got 15 of the last 17 quarters decreasing in productivity. So I think it'd be interesting to talk about it in terms of a more relative scale. So those industries, yes, I totally agree with that. But if you put that then, okay, the relative adoption in Canada or BC relative to other, and I think that's the greatest opportunity that we have. I think we're in a very exciting time where we're going to start to leapfrog a lot of people. And I think that's where the opportunity exists for all of us.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And last but definitely not least, Niamh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that consumers are just coming to expect, a better user experience when it comes to, the tech interface with the companies that they interact with. So I think, maybe the finance industry is further ahead than the insurance industry. I certainly think there could be improvements made there. And I think, the pharmaceutical industry, we haven't listed that there, but that's another one where, it's still very fax and PDF heavy. So I think that the consumers are going to vote with their feet. And maybe mining is, obviously less consumer facing, but more organizational efficiencies with tech adoption. But I do think that the industries are going to find that their numbers are declining, and their competitors are going to take over if they're not serving the consumers who are very comfortable with technology and actually expect it and demand it from a user perspective.
Yeah, there's often this, or there's all for the last decade plus, there's been this consumerization of a lot of these services, and I think that's probably a good thing as we have more and more digital natives and people that understand how to use it. We can see the influence of that in these applications. So thanks. So I think we can agree that tech adoption is necessary for our companies to all grow, but it can be difficult to determine the right technology for a team. Can you guys tell the audience more about how your clients assess new technology before they buy, and where you can maybe distinguish between maybe your best and your worst customers? Andrew, again, we'll kick off with you because you got interesting, probably perspective in the last few years on that.
Yeah, I think just to kind of go at this maybe a little bit backwards in terms of your best and worst customers first, and the best and worst customers, the best customers are the ones with a bias for action. They understand that they're trying to solve a business problem. They understand that for example, trying to drive 0.5% off their SG&A, or you got 300 basis points on your cost of goods sold that you got to drive out. Understanding that problem and then how you're going to leverage technology or different components of technology as you move forward to address that issue is the best customer and the most successful thing that we're seeing around the globe right now. Customers, you moving forward with an idea of how to mitigate potential risks, making sure you get to production, making sure that your business users are using it and realizing it, and then ensuring is the technology best suited for you in what you're trying to achieve. But organizations that are evaluating technology without first leading with those financial metrics and which way they're trying to drive and pull on which financial lever are the ones that are not set up for success. And that's the first thing that we look for, is quantifying that value, and then we'll figure out which technology or technologies can help solve the problem. That's the key to it all.
Excellent, thanks. Niamh, you've seen and been part of a pretty rapid, successful scale up, serving SMEs up to large organizations and beyond. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's vital to trial the product. You really want to play around with the interface and the functionality before you make a decision. And certainly at Clio, every customer can trial the LPM for 7 days for free. And what I'd recommend folks do, whether they're trialing Clio or other tech stacks, is don't only focus on what the technology can do, focus on what it can't do, because no vendor wants a lack of mutuality vis-a-vis their customers. Every tech stack has a limitation as to the great magic it can perform for its customers, and everything else is on the roadmap. And we always want our customers to know exactly, when things are net new, when features are launching, and what the technology can't do at this point in time. And you never want to be oversold and then underserved. So I think the trial is very important. And then I think, to your question about the best and worst customers, I think the best customers are folks that are just willing to learn and play around with the solution and participate in the training and call support and pressure test us, like push us to develop new features. We listen to our customers. They actually build our product roadmap. And then I'd say our worst customers, unfortunately, are just those folks that maybe didn't shop around enough and just have an overestimation as to, you know, how quickly the solution will make your cup of coffee in the morning when it's actually a SaaS platform, you know.
Right.
So we just want everyone to buy a solution that is tailored for those needs, and just trial products, run a mini RFP, and talk to the product folks so you know exactly what you're getting.
Excellent, thanks. And you know, Kevin, your current product is it can easily demonstrate some pretty powerful things out of the box, but I think probably requires some you know, some fine tuning and hand holding along the way. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, part of the challenge that we see, I'll take a bit of a different perspective. I'll go to the worst customers and then I'll maybe jump to some of the better ones. And I completely agree with the previous points. The challenge that we see, AI threw a wrench in everything. So just call out the elephant in the room. AI has been brutally bad to the buying decisions that we see happening within organizations, because there's a hype cycle. And during the hype cycle, everyone's getting wrapped up on AI is intelligent without realizing that let's get back to basics. And those basics are you need a business objective, and that technology needs to fill a business objective. So you do need to go trial, but you have to trial the software in order to meet a business objective. And what we're seeing is the cart leading the horse in a lot of cases, where the tech teams are now leading, and those tech teams are too deep into the world of AI without getting their head up and out of the weeds to understand that the business objectives is ROI. We need to make money. We need to cut costs. There's economic challenges. And we're finding that the teams are conflicted. And Gartner recently confirmed that about 75% of the buying decisions are completely conflicted. The business leaders are not intimately involved. And you need to get the business leadership intimately involved. And that business leadership needs to really understand AI at a high level. And AI is not intelligent. You're not buying a robot, you're buying technology. So you have to follow the same principles of how to adopt that technology into your practice. But the other big element on this that we see that causes the disruption is the fact that this is business transformation. Don't expect your technology to just come in and use the same workflow you've used for the last 20 years. This is disruptive technology, requires business transformation. The business needs to wrap their head around it and actually control the horse and the cart.
Really appreciate that perspective. You know, definitely the AI and the readiness for it in the organization has been a big challenge. You know, Caitlin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, when we were having the prep session, I was joking, you know, being someone in the seat of general counsel whose team, or, you know, even me personally, I'm heavily involved in getting new customers signed and kind of that last phase of a sales cycle. And so I was joking, you know, I love the customers that kind of sign anything quickly and implement right away. And those are the best customers. But I really do say that in jest, because Niamh's right. Like, those tend to be the customers. If you haven't sort of done the work to survey the market, engage in maybe an RFP process, do your due diligence, get under the hood, do demos, those are customers that are frankly less likely to find value in the solution, and they're less likely to be long-term good customers. And so really agree with everything my colleagues have said. Like, the best customers are the ones who have a well-articulated, really well-identified business need or business problem that they're trying to solve, and a view on how this particular tech stack can solve that problem, and really partner with us closely in a very ongoing way about the continual improvement of the service in order to solve that problem. Like, we talk a lot about customers using our products in anger. And what we mean by that is we really want customers using it intensely, regularly, and to solve a really hard problem, and to engage with us in the dialogue about how over time we can better help them do that. I mean, Niamh said this, well, customers drive the roadmap. I think that's true for us too. You know, we really develop and improve products to better serve the market based on customer feedback. So that partnership, that ongoing dialogue is really crucial.
It's really interesting you say that. I love that they use the product in anger. I think interesting perspective on the flip side, and this is maybe a little bit flavored with a lot of early stage, AI companies as of late, born out of a technology, not a problem, not a customer issue where, in traditional parlance, the customer is bleeding from the neck and you're trying to solve that problem. So we've seen a lot of the reverse happen too, where a lot of technology companies are tech first and not, ideal customer profile driven or use case driven. And then you end up with this gap, people are trying to buy something or being pushed something and it doesn't actually solve a real problem. So I think we see that. So it's great to have you folks on the panel with the depth of experience you have. And hopefully if there are other, even founders who are listening to this that are earlier in their journey, take the reverse note, that you really, really have to make sure that you've got a well-articulated customer problem you're solving and who it's for and who it's not for, because wow, managing churn for a missold to ICP is a lot of work. So appreciate everyone's perspective. Now flipping a little bit, what do you think are some of the ways that customers can actually manage both the risks and the opportunities of adopting new technology, while still, maximizing its potential? Niamh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, as Caitlin said, it's mastering the art of software vendor procurement. It's a whole process, and I would encourage people to heavily lean on their IT tech teams internally as part of that vendor evaluation. Assess the financial stability of the vendor. You never want that scary moment where, you invested in a product and it's just not viable from a commercial perspective for improvements or updates. Challenge the product folks. Don't only talk to the sales folks, because you're going to get the real answer from the product folks, and make sure you're fully aware of what the functionality can't do. If something seems too good to be true, it typically is. And then just change management. I think a lot of tech procurement, there's invariably a migration process involved. Maybe you're migrating data, you're training teams on a net new solution, and factor that into your overall implementation, and just provide really good solid training and get buy-in. When I purchase tech tools, I typically try to have an enterprise license so that anyone can access the solution and it's not locked down to a chosen few, because I really want people to lean into the efficiencies. So just again, 101 of mastering vendor procurement, I think you can really balance the risks while maximizing potential.
No, that's great. And Kevin, over to you. You obviously you're dealing with financial data, and so that comes with it. It's again huge opportunity, but tremendous amount of risk. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, the risks are easily managed, and I think that's one of the misconceptions that people have. You can easily manage the risks. You can easily manage the risks around your data. You can manage the risk around how that data is going to be used by applying the right technology. I think from managing the risk process, that is something I'm actually going to jump on what Andrew brought up was the productivity problem, because Andrew asked if he could bring it up in our practice session. And it's like, yes, that's a trigger for me. So I get hot under the collar a lot of times, because I see a difference between how Canada reacts to risk, or Canadians react to risk, and I see the difference in how Americans approach it as well. What you need is the ability to effectively manage the risk, and you can easily do that on any technology adoption through paid pilots, through the ability to trial before you buy. And a lot of Canadian organizations don't seem to head down that path as quickly as the American organization. I was actually surprised to see the European number as well. Especially now, you have to learn. I see a lot of government officials tell Canadian organizations in panels like this, you just have to go fast. It's like, no, you don't. Going fast is a outcome of doing something else right. And what you have to do is have a risk mitigation process in place with your technology, and trial and fail fast. Figure out how to trial, how to fail fast. And that will allow your organization to move fast. And the risks are easily managed around your data.
So Andrew, Kevin's opened the door again back to your favorite topic. So I'll pass it over to you for the various components of that.
Oh, I'm not gonna
Everyone
jump
sit
into
down.
I'm not
Everyone's
going
sitting
to
down.
jump into a soliloquy, I
Yeah.
promise.
I've got
Um,
coffee.
Yeah.
No, I think that's the number one thing for us, right? When you look at productivity, there's two sides of it, measured on its revenue, its GDP by labor hours, right? And so, yes, we talk about some of these tools saving us time, but it's all about for us. And I'm going to jump on something Niamh said, or sorry, compliment something Niamh said, where you cannot underestimate a human's hatred of change. Like when my TV provider changed the way my remote control worked, I started to cry. Like there's just not enough space in our brains to do it. So that's why I say, like, we've got to accelerate our ability to it's not just about saving time, it's about removing the non-value add tasks. And that's why I always say you have to get to production. You have to have your risks mitigated so you can shut it down or migrate or change as you go. But you have to get to production to get that feedback. You have to work with those business users and see where the resistance to change is, and then find out if you have a real solution or not, because that's where you're going to find out. And that's where you're going to find out if, am I removing the non-value add time so I can focus on higher value activities? Or do I have a really cool tech solution like Rob, you mentioned earlier, that it's kind of cool and kind of fun, but doesn't really solve a problem. And I'm not going to drop my COGS by 300 basis points relative to my peer set. Like this, I could go on for hours, so I'm going to stop there and let Caitlin have a chat.
Yeah, it's good. Well, Ken, we'll throw over to you because I think you spend some time in the risk world as well, so it's probably big on your mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, in our business, we take in a lot of really sensitive personal information, highly regulated data ultimately. And so for customers of a solution like ours, where that is the type of data being transferred and processed, it is important, again, just doubling down on this due diligence aspect, right? Like pressure tests, kind of the security posture of the vendor, pressure test their privacy posture. Do you have the requisite confidence level that they can handle the data that you're going to send them or upload onto the platform in an appropriate way? That's really critical, if particularly where that's kind of the type of business being transacted. I also really, would punctuate what everyone has said around change being hard and the criticality of having a really thoughtful business transformation or change management and implementation plan. And also being able to fail quickly if it hasn't worked out. And just super tactically, one of the ways to do that right is to make sure that you're not entering into long-term contracts. Like, I love an auto renew. I always try and push people to sign up to auto renewal contracts, but that's as a seller. As a buyer of technology, no, you want to be able to get out of it quickly and not be committed to paying continually over time for a service that isn't ultimately solving your problem.
No, that's great. I think, a couple quick perspectives. I'm on a board of a company that had a problem last year with that exact issue. They'd signed a contract on a bunch of promises, and we needed some dev work to be done to actually figure out if those promises could be met, and they couldn't. And know it. And I think, partially, to both Niamh and Kevin's points too, is I think there is a little bit of unfortunately, a cultural thing in Canada where we're kind of like, okay, well, we'll just make it work. No, you got to push back. There's open that door, kick it open, and say, hey, this didn't meet my needs. And there's some risk. I think also on the risk one, we do a lot of work in sort of looking at massive global data to predict vendor risk, the security posture around that. And for a lot of folks, when you do integrate something, that's where the bad guys come through the side door of a vendor typically, these days, not through the front door. So when you are working with a large implementation, that's definitely something that is getting a little more attention, but it's also very, very scary. So appreciate everyone's, thoughts on that. So again, turning back over to, maybe costs and ROI, obviously a huge part of adopting technology and being a customer of technology is finding the right balance between your cost, what you spend, and the return on that investment. How do you think you can familiarize yourself enough as a customer to negotiate with technical experts, in particular if it's a highly technical solution? And Caitlin, maybe we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, and I think, what I would say to this is that you shouldn't have to be a technical expert to use this product. And look, like if it's a solution designed for, really sophisticated engineering problem, okay, fine. But generally speaking, if you're looking at a solution that's going to be used across the organization, whether it's by, you know, people in marketing or HR or revenue facing, customer facing teams, like it should be very, very user friendly and really easy to understand and help people you know, be more efficient and more effective in their daily tasks. And so again, I think really the best way to do this, to kind of maximize the ROI, is to do a lot of homework, to get the demos, to talk, as Niamh said, to the product people, to get the sandbox access, to play around with it as much as you need in order to satisfy yourself that this is a solution that anyone in the company who needs to use it to do their job can in fact use it and get productivity and return out of it. Another thing, and this is something we welcome, but I also challenge a lot of our vendors on, is, you know, share with me some referenceable customers. Let me talk to people who are using it, who've implemented it. How do they like it? What are the challenges they have? You know, get the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think, you know, particularly in that cost benefit analysis, if the cost is high, but there's potential high benefit, like the more you spend time in this procurement process, probably the better balance you're going to strike when you come out of it.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a great advice, right? Like, you know, I think nothing tells you more than what other customers have to say about a product. So, Niamh, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, agree with everything Caitlin said. I think demystifying tech speak is something we all have to really get comfortable with and just build out that muscle of challenging the tech geeks when they're not translating something in a way that's actionable and consumer friendly. You know, I love going on product demo calls because I just have my long list of questions. But on the flip side, when it comes to ROI, I think a really crucial thing is to craft your own tech blueprint at the start of the process. And as you begin to speak to vendors, you may realize that some of the things you want on the list just aren't available in the market. And that can be a bit of a humbling experience and maybe even a bit of a disappointing experience. But you never want to find out after you've implemented the solution, you know, that maybe the ROI just isn't there. So I think if you have those 5 critical things on your tech blueprint, I need these 5 things to be available to me in order to generate my ROI. And if you find out only 4 things are available in the marketplace, then you refine your tech blueprint. You know, we never want our customers to have expectations that we can't meet. So I think those 2 things for ROI: demystify the tech jargon and then craft your own tech blueprint. And you might need to take a few things off the list, or maybe you might be able to add a few things on the list once you build out the tech speak.
I get excellent advice. Kevin, curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
For this, I'm going to revert back to just a bit of a focus on the AI world again. That's where we are, but it's rearing its ugly head right now from a tech decision-making perspective, especially around costs. We're seeing a massive hit, even on Microsoft, on their surprise on just how expensive it is to do AI. We get asked a lot by medium-sized businesses and smaller businesses, we want to go and implement AI and we want to train your models with our data. And it's like, no, you can't afford it. So one of the things that we would recommend a lot of our customers doing is you really have to wrap your heads around the cost of doing the technology implementation, especially when it comes to AI. It's not as cheap as you think it is. You just can't pull an off-the-shelf set of tooling and go to town, because this is going to touch your compute, it's going to touch your apps, and it's going to touch your data. It's going to be in everything that you find sensitive within your organization. The other flip side of this is the ROI. This is why you have to have clear business objectives and what the ROI has, and the business has to be very clear on the business disruption side of it. Because we're seeing AI today delivering fantastic results. That's the hype. The reality of it is, even if you look at Microsoft's recent Copilot numbers, employees are eking out maybe 14 minutes of productivity a day, and that would be hard pressed. Now, for your organization, is that 14 minutes really going to return the ROI you're looking for? So you have to be very clear on the cost of what it would take to get there in order to balance for, do you really want a big lift from this technology adoption, or are you looking for incremental gains? And competing with the likes of American organizations and European organizations, a lot of companies have to look at bigger lifts. What's going to change the game for them? What's going to keep their costs under control so that they can invest more into innovation to make a bigger play in the market?
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks, Kevin. I think again, not to too much to AI, but we certainly see a lot of conflicting data around AI and adoption, productivity, as much as token costs have dropped through the floor externally in a lot of ways. There's unintended or unexpected costs that people haven't really factored in that can be very difficult. Again, Andrew, we'll turn over to you. Closing word on this question, because I'm sure you spend a lot of your time with your clients in this world.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing is a lot more moves right now to shared outcome pricing. So the techno, babble, don't care, is what a lot of customers are saying. I have a problem. I need you to solve it. I need you to put skin in the game. If it comes out big, then you'll share. If it doesn't, then it won't work and you won't get it. But we see a lot of customers right now because of the advancements. Yes, everybody has to do their due diligence, of course, to understand what's in the tech stack or understand what you're trying to do. But most customers now are moving. They're not going to pay you for trying real hard. So they're not going to pay you for a subscription that may or may not work. You don't really know how. It's like, okay, if I understand your technology well enough and it's going to help me solve this problem, are you willing to make a bet on this? And we're seeing more and more and more of that all the time right now. And I think that's a really good opportunity for both sides. I think that's a really good opportunity for tech companies, whether you're in AI or other. You're not worried about, oh my goodness, this project, if it doesn't take 6 months or 2 years or whatever it is, or then I'm not going to be able to work through it. The faster you can build the stuff to actually deliver it to realize value. And on the flip side, for the customers that are consuming whatever technology it is, there's a great article. Charlie Grinnell, actually, from Right Metric. I don't know if it was Charlie on the phone, but Charlie sent me this article called "It's Time to Start Chopping Wood with a Dull Axe," and it's about understanding that we're trying to solve a problem, and you're going to do your due diligence, but you're not maybe going to understand every possible technical component of every solution out there. You need to understand the ones that are relative to your business problem, and then act on that. And I think that's the balance between the ROI and being able to understand the technology well enough to make sure that both partners are focused on solving that solution.
No, that's great, and I think it's so true. Everything has become very complex. It's not even 10 years ago. If you did get on the call with the product people and the engineers, and it was very important, you could probably understand a lot of the stack. But there is a lot of magic happening in areas where it is hard to get under the hood and truly understand it. So being able to know what you need to achieve to make that decision is critical. So we're going to question in the chat. What differences do you see between the challenges large enterprises and small businesses face when adopting new technology? Niamh, maybe I'll put you on the spot first.
Yeah, I think for large enterprises, there's just much bigger stakeholder engagement involved. There's just a wider audience to serve and to keep happy. So just a team effort, like I said, your software due diligence tech team, you need to mobilize, and then the change management piece as you move from one tech stack to another. For smaller enterprises, I think there can often be more urgency. It's like, just get it done already. And that's where maybe you might have a misstep. You might select the wrong vendor. Maybe the ROI isn't there. So yeah, I think, both industries have a challenge, but I think we've covered a lot of, the pitfalls and the recommendations here over the course of the morning.
I appreciate it. Andrew, maybe I'll turn back to you. You deal with a lot of, and I know you deal with some government agencies as well. Maybe we'll throw government in there. What are the government, large enterprises, and small businesses, having to adopt these new tech things that we all build?
It's super interesting right now. It's the culture and the leadership in the large enterprises tend to be, I find, because they've been so successful in scaling up the way they've scaled up, they tend to think that it needs to fit a block and everybody has to do the same thing. And so that's why you see more resistance to the change and the need to get more stakeholders on board, because everybody thinks it's going to be one solution to fit them all, and that's not what we're seeing right now. One of the things that we're doing with like some of the government agencies around the world is we're seeing multiple small solutions being put into various ministries or departments or whatever. It's the same thing in large enterprises and small companies right now, where organizations are starting to make that shift from large monolithic solutions to smaller ones. Organizations, or some of them, Moderna just had a case study that was out on ChatGPT Enterprise. So they created 750 GPTs across their organization in less than 3 months, right? To help with all sorts of back office solutions. So that's where we're seeing a big shift right now is the change from one large monolithic solution to solve all, one ring to rule them all kind of idea, down into multiple solutions and being able to orchestrate and identify and find those solutions across the organization.
Very cool. Thanks. Caitlin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, enterprise and mid-market or small business are all segments that we serve. I certainly agree that there are differences in terms of how, customers in these segments consider tech adoption and look at tech, acquiring new tech tools. I also think, though, in addition to the size of the customer, there's an industry difference, right? And so, not all enterprise customers are alike. You can have an enterprise scale customer in a really digital first, fast moving, tech forward industry. And they're going to engage differently from an enterprise scale customer in a much more traditional, maybe sort of more earlier on their tech adoption journey. And they can all be really great customers. Enterprise customers tend to consume technology at a scale that makes them really valuable from a revenue generating perspective. But what we see is whether it's because they're slow moving or because they're sort of required to bring a different level of diligence to bear on the procurement, like it tends to be a longer process, right? It's going to take longer from start to finish. Whereas, the mid-market or small businesses may already be more digital first. They may be more risk on. They may be more willing to fail quickly and try things. They're all great segments, but there's definitely nuance in terms of how the buying process looks across those segments and across verticals, I would say.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. And Kevin, maybe last word on this one. What do you think?
Simply from the small and the mid-sized perspective, they move faster. They're more apt to do SaaS type solutions. The larger organizations, and I agree with everything that's been said before, they're bigger. There's a lot more consensus building that happens to happen internally, and that's tough for a lot of organizations to get through, just given the number of parties involved. So it takes a long time. But there's also a mentality within larger organizations to build versus buy that gets caught up from a time span perspective. And we estimate that it takes about 18 months for an organization to fail and go back into the buy process. So that's a long time without generating an ROI.
Right. And it's interesting. I think I appreciate everyone's comments, to Andy's stat on the GPTs, I think, again, from an AI standpoint, we're seeing this agentification kind of wave happen where, folks are talking about, well, can an organization internally build, something instead of buying it by, pulling together a bunch of, autonomous agents that work together and figure things out. And certainly interesting days on that, but there's also something to be said for a hardened product that has proper data privacy, rules, security controls, SOC 2 compliance, whatever happens to be, depending what area you're in, versus kind of pulling things together in a bit of a spaghetti world. But it's moving pretty fast. So I've got my final question I always like to ask is a little bit of the crystal ball style question, because we often have very diverse audience, listening and watching this in the replay down the road. when you think about your customers and their need to consider, what they need to consider when adopting technology, what advice do you have? Again, we've got we've had a very interesting conversation, but there's definitely I think when people walk away from these things, it's like, what do we need to do? Help me out with some bullet points on what to think about. So Niamh, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we've said already about the procurement process, vet your tech, do a trial. But maybe one thing we haven't discussed, and again, mapping it back to AI, which is the hottest tech that's probably being researched these days. I think really lean into understanding what the subscription agreement says about the scope of the solution, just from a contractual perspective, because we can get very caught up in, the trial and the user interface and the heuristics and the buttons and the output. But in the event of a dispute or just disappointment as to the scope of what you've paid for, you really want to have a very clear understanding of, how the AI works, what it can't do, what it's training on, what it's not training on, where the data is, who's getting access to it, what the retention is, and how you can retract and terminate and disentangle yourself from the relationship if it isn't working out, especially if you're dealing with a large data set. So I think with, an emergent technology, just getting really, really comfortable with, again, demystifying the tech speak and talking to the procurement teams, talk to the product and the legal team and say, like, walk me through this provision. I want to make sure I'm translating it appropriately to my team internally. So there's no sort of gut check moment, or maybe you've bought something that has access to, data that you weren't really sure was going to be shared or trained elsewhere. So again, AI it's a new technology. And I think that the more we just remind ourselves, like, that learning curve is steep, but it's worth the investment. I think, there's no surprises there, and your adoption process will hopefully be more seamless.
Awesome. Thanks. Andrew, what's your crystal ball thoughts?
I think one of the things that we're seeing around purchasing, and I think that we're going to circle back actually a little bit in this, is people are going to put more and more trust in who they're dealing with. I think that the trust factor that you build with whomever you're dealing with on the other side, as Niamh just pointed out, if you got to have that tough conversation, or you've got to be, understand that, hey, maybe this isn't quite what I thought it was. The transactional relationships are, I think, going to go away further even than they are today. I think with the pace of change, I think with, people are going to start putting more and more value in the credibility and the trust of the person they're dealing with. So if you get into those challenging conversations or identifying opportunities, they're going to believe more and they're going to do that work more. So that's where I see things going, is sort of those outcome-based solution conversations, but more and more trust and more focus being put on the trust of the relationship with the people involved in the conversation.
No, it's a very, very good point. Caitlin, we'll turn over to you. Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, well, thanks for coming. Caitlin, what are your thoughts? I mean, to echo what Andrew said, I mean, you live in a trust world with your product and service in many, many ways. What are your thoughts, and what kind of advice would you give to customers looking to adopt technology?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would just emphasize three themes that we've really touched on a lot in the course of this conversation. The first is that I think it's absolutely critical to be really clear internally as to what your challenge is. What is the business problem that you're trying to solve? Clarity around that is critical, because invariably you're going to go test the market, survey the market, talk to people. You're going to get a lot of sales pitches. You're going to hear a lot of technical jargon. You're going to hear about bells and whistles, and just really being clear on what problem you're actually trying to solve and choosing a solution that best solves that problem is important. I think then too, having a really cogent change management strategy and implementation plan is going to really go a long way to ensuring success. And then three, anticipating what could go wrong. How might this end badly? Trying to mitigate that up front, but then recognizing that if, unfortunately it transpires, extracting yourself as quickly as possible and with the least amount of damage is also critical.
That's awesome. That last point there, that concept of the pre-mortem.
Yeah.
Before you sign up is, Murphy's Law, what could go wrong will go wrong. And if it goes wrong, what are the possibilities, and be ready for them, because things rarely go.
What is the
smoothly.
blast radius?
Blast radius.
Termination. It can be much bigger than you think. And you never
Yeah.
want to be reading the contract for the first time when you're terminating. It's not a
Absolutely. That's great advice from a company that serves a lot of lawyers. So it's
Exactly. Yeah. So
100% know what
my
that's for.
customers are lawyers, so I have to bring my A game. They're always one
Yeah.
step ahead of me.
That's great. And Kevin, what do you think? What's your advice here?
Well, to get started, I break it down into three things. One, time box. I time box all the time. What do I want to achieve, and what's the time frame to go and achieve it? And I box it to that time. And I don't find a lot of organizations doing so. They end up with scope creep. They end up with expanding what they're going to do in the time frame, what they're going to do. Time box it. Learn how to time box and keep the scope time boxed. So that's the one big thing. The other one is focus in on the transformation you want to get within the business. So you have to time box, you have to transform. And the third part of it is you have to understand the roadmap of any technology that you're adopting, because you're buying into that journey, as come up before. You need to understand that where's this vendor going? If you're just solving a point solution, keep that in scope, keep that in mind. If you're looking at expanding beyond the initial use case into other use cases, get to know the roadmap. Get to know how this company is going to execute on that roadmap and how good they are at executing on that roadmap. So it's really coming down to time box, transform, and roadmap.
That's a great point. That last one too. Yeah, if you all of a sudden find yourself as the buyer outside of your vendor's ideal customer profile, and their roadmap is diverging from where you are, wow, you feel pretty, out at sea sometimes. So that's a really good piece of advice. Yeah. Well, team, thank you all for your time and your incredible insights. Again, it's pretty fortunate that we were able to get everyone together with such amazing experience. Hopefully everyone in the audience got some great takeaways from this. I certainly did.